I'd now like to talk about an inspector calls in more detail. I want to talk about, I will go through its plot, I shall talk about its principal themes and some productions. I've mentioned that it's J.B. Priestley's most popular play. However, that was not the case right at the very beginning. It's one of those plays whose reputation has grown over time, and there are reasons for this which I hope that I'll be able to explain. As mentioned, it's also a staple of amateur theatre groups. Its themes are many, but I'm going to just concentrate on 4 of them. The first being family. The play begins with a family, the Birlings, who are celebrating the marriage of, or the impending marriage of their daughter Sheila to another family, the Crofts. However, the play goes beyond the family of the Birlings to the inspector's idea of the fact that the human race is one family and that we should be looking after one another. So you might want to talk about this in your class. What do we understand by family in Inspector Calls? And does the inspectors call for us to belong to each other, even though we may not be related by blood, to have coherence and logic? The other aspect that's important to an Inspector Calls is the aspect of time. This was something that J.B. Priestley was very interested in, and an Inspector Calls forms part of a number of other plays that are known as J.B. Priestley's time plays. These include Dangerous Corner, I Have Been Here Before, and Time and the Conways. The 20th century saw developments in physics that changed our view of time, particularly the work of Einstein, particularly his theories regarding the way that time could work within dimensions, the 4th dimension. So according to Einstein, time could be simultaneously lived in past, present and future. This was an idea that fascinated Priestley, and he experiments with time in a number of his plays. So in An Inspector Calls, the death of Eva Smith at first has not taken place in real time. The inspector has come from the future, possibly, to warn the family about their involvement in her death through various actions that they have performed. And of course, the twist at the end of the play is that a phone call announces that an inspector will be visiting the family about the suicide of a young woman who has just turned up at the infirmary. So time has been, time from the future has been sort of transposed, and also it's made into a circular view of time. So the action at the beginning of the play presumably is going to repeat itself after the play has finished. One of the other key aspects of an Inspector Calls is class. Class is very important both within the play and also in Priestley's ideas about politics. The opening scene of An Inspector Calls is all about class. It's about a dynastic marriage, the Birlings and the Crofts, 2 industrial families who have come together. However, it's interesting that Mr Birling has come from a class that's different to Gerald's family. Gerald's family are what one would call old money, whereas Mr Birling has come from a lower class, but he has made a great deal of money. He's come from new money. And the marriage for Mr Birling is important because it elevates his status within the class system by marrying into the Crofts. He says at one point, perhaps your mother doesn't approve of this marriage, Gerald, I know she comes from an old country family and she's marrying the daughter of an industrialist. Of course, also Mr Birling makes mistakes that are markers of his class. So, for example, he praises the cook, which his wife, also someone from a class above himself, reproves him gently. He also is keen to impress Gerald with the port, the same brand of port that his father has drinks. There's also the inference that Gerald's parents have snubbed the engagement celebrations by being away. It's implied, it's not stated, but perhaps they look down on the Birlings. One of the other things that Mr Birling does in one of his speeches to the young people in Act 1 is he argues that by 1940 all class differences will have been erased, that by 1940 industrial strife will have ended and that that we will have a classless society. Certainly this was one of the aims of the Labour Party when they came to government in 1945. However, even by 1946, audiences would have made their own minds up whether that had actually happened. And of course, watching the play now in 2024, we might argue that those class differences are still very much with us. And it's something I want to talk about later when I come to talk about the Stephen Daldry production. I've mentioned politics, and of course the place and the time in which the play is set are important. 1912, 2 years before the outbreak of World War I. It's interesting that Mr Birling mentions the Titanic. It's a symbol of capitalism. It's interesting that that symbol of capitalism is something that Mr Birling is intrigued by. And of course, we know that the unsinkable ship is going to sink. It's also a time in which Mr Birling poo-poos any ideas that there's going to be an outbreak of war. He also blames, interestingly, socialist writers such as H.G. Wells and George Bernard Shaw, who warn about a war with Europe. So again, audiences in 1946 who had just gone through a major conflict would have found Mr Birling's comments at the beginning of the play ironic, to say the least.